So we're 4 lines down from the bottom on Kuf Yadalid Amid Base. Rabbi Yechanan. Mishkanei Umeis, Shemte Me'al Gan Be'ban. So Mishkanei Umeis, this is a case we've actually had earlier in the Gemara. Rashi explained Mishkanei Umeis, Loi Vel'ach Sheheshav Lois Ha'ibit. So talking about Ruvain borrowed from Shimon.
Yeah.
He gave a mashkin. This is the usual case. He took the mashkin at the end. Shimon took a mashkin from Ruvain, and then night came. It was Ruvain's blanket. He had to give it back to Ruvain, and during the night, Ruvain died while he was still in possession of his own mashkin, his own blanket. So Rabbi Yechanan says the Shimon, the lender, can take from the estate this blanket, this mashkin. Normally, metaltalin are not meshubed to a bal chayiv, but a mashkin is different. Good morning, Rafal. Good morning, Rafal. We're 4 lines from the bottom on Kuf Yadalid Amid Beis. We just said b'shem Rabbi Yechanan that if a lender returned the mashkin to the borrower because the borrower needs to use it, like we've seen, he has to return it, and then the borrower died, the lender can take the mashkin from the yarshin. Meisvei, the Gemara, Rameya, mashkin lama achzirin. Rameya says, that's a question. Since we're letting him take a mashkin, why does he have to give it back? Why does the lender, after he takes a mashkin, have to give it back to the borrower? The Gemara, lama machzirin. What kind of question is that? Rachman Amar Hada. That's the Torah says that you have to return to him the security when he needs it. Ella. So Gemara says, so we have to change what the Rameya said. Ella me'achashem machzirin lama chayzin u'mashkin. The Gemara's question is the other way around. Since you have to return it anyway to this lender, to this borrower, whenever he needs it, it's his blanket. So why do you go after? Shimon took the blanket as a mashkin. Then it came night, and now Ruvain needs it to sleep on. Why after that night does Shimon take it again? What's the point? The next night he's going to have to give it back to him again anyway.
Shouldn't have this been asked like a few blocks back?
We'll see. We're gonna have this. This Gemara is going to be slightly different. We're gonna end up in a different place. I don't think we had this specifically. I think you probably we had the question of whether you could take away from a yasim. That question.
No, I'm not talking about this. Doesn't seem like it's about the fact that the guy died. This just seems like a general question on the whole.
Right. Well, so we're going to get to exactly what this Bryce was saying. I don't think we've seen this Bryce.
No. I'm just saying the question of why would you be machzer? I mean, why would you be lemachayzun or mashkinan? Should have been asked at the very beginning when we started learning about mashkin. Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you're saying this has been bothering you from the beginning. It sounds like a
pointless endeavor. It didn't bother me because there's a cusp. So I just, if it bothered you, then it should have been bothering you from the very beginning. If it doesn't bother you, then don't ask you now.
We're going to see where we're going to end up. That the point is different than what it sounds like.
All right.
So the Gemara is asking Lama Chayzon Mash. And so why do you go take it again from the loiva each time if you know anyway you're going to have to return it the next day? The Gemara answers for 2 reasons. In order that if it will be in your rishus, that shvius won't be meshamet. That if shvius comes along, as long as you have a mashkin, the loan doesn't become forgiven, and also that it doesn't become regular metaltalin that you normally can't take from the children. So the Gemara, for time of the hadam or mashkine, the only reason we're saying that it becomes that he can take it away from the yarshim is because if he takes it during the day, and it sounds like if the father dies during the day, then he could take it back, or at night, whichever the case may be. As long as only while the mashkin is physically by the lender, then he's going to have that's when he's not going to have a din of metaltal, and then he's going to be able to take it. Haloi hadu mashkin eloi, but it's mashkin. But if it was still by the borrower, if it was physically by the borrower, he would not be able to get it back. So this is not like what we just said, B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan had said, Rabbi Yechanan says, as long as there's a mashkin, he can take it. It doesn't make a difference if it's by the lender or by the borrower, even after it was returned to the borrower and he's using it. Didn't we have to we already had to amend this memra of Rameir, this brisa of Rameir. So let's amend it even a little more. The question really is like this. Since it's a din of Chazara, what's the point in the first place of the lender taking the mashkin? It's going to be every day and every night, whichever the case may be. Let's say every night it's his blanket. Every night he's going to have to return it to the lender, to the borrower. Why does he bother with the whole thing? So the Gemara, the answer is because as long as it has a din that it's a mashkin, regardless of where it is physically, even if he has to return it to the loiva, it's still going to have the din of a mashkin that shvius will not be meshamet alone. And like Rabbi Yechanan said, as long as it became a mashkin, even if he returned it to the loiva, it's going to have a din that it's if the borrower dies, if Reuven dies, that Shimon, the lender, will be able to take it away from his children. It won't have a din of a tatel, it will have a din of a mashkin. So the question ultimately is, right, what's the point of making a mashkin if you have to return it? And the answer is for these two things.
Even though it's only for 30 days. Right.
Right.
The whole mashkin thing doesn't really make the whole thing doesn't make sense.
Doesn't seem like the biggest nafkamina to you. You just wait 30 days. Yeah. Listen, all I know is there's a massive amount of laws about going to take away, about debt collection. A lot of restrictions on debt collectors, and a big part of it is to put pressure on the person. So you're like thinking about it. What's the big deal? In the end, it monetarily comes out the same. But the fact is, practically the way people live is that if they get pressure to pay a loan, they'll pay it. So this gives another tool to the borrower, to the lender, to get his money back, without being ethically or morally compromised by putting too much pressure. Tana Rabban. The pasuk says, when you have some type of loan by your friend, you shouldn't go into his house to remove the mashkin. Gemara says you can't go to his house. We learn from here that's only the borrower himself. But if someone guaranteed the loan, and now the time comes for the loan to be paid, and the borrower, as is always the case, refuses to pay, and then so you go to the Arev, the rich guy, and he says, I'm also not paying. Then you can go into his house to take a mashkin. This restriction that you can't take in from the house of the borrower is only on the borrower, but not on the Arev. Because it says, Lebese, only his house. As the pasuk says, you could take his beged because he provided he was an arev for a strange person, but someone he stuck his nose into this transaction. He said, I'm going to guarantee it. So now you can take his beged from him. In addition, it says, B'ni, if you provide a guarantee to your friend, you open your hand to someone who is a stranger to you. And another din, if you hurt someone with what you say, you cause them to stumble with what you say. Asay zois, this is what you should do. Eifai, at least. B'ni. Be notzel, in order to be saved. Ki bos b'kaf reyecha. Because you've gotten into the hand of your friend. Lech hisrafim v'rav. You should go and make yourself small. V'rav reyecha. And make your friend big. You should treat him as a you should treat him well. So we divide this up into two parts. So the answer, the hinotzel, how to save yourself from this situation. We said two things. First of all, if you acted as an orev to guarantee a friend's loan, and secondly, if you made fun of someone. So what you should do? So the first thing was, if you became an orev, open up your hand to pay him. Vimlav, but if you didn't provide money, rather than you just stam insulted, the second part of the pasuk, harbol of reim, we're separating this word. Which said lech his rafim, which we're dividing that into hatale pieces. To open up your hand. And the second one, v'rahav, we're doing into rav reyecha. We changed it v'lav harbol of reim. You should get a lot of friends to go over and talk to him and convince him to forgive you. But in any case, the point of all this is that we see that the beginning of the pasuk essentially said that if you're an arev, the lender could go and take your beged. There's no restriction that he can't go into your house. Letzad sheni. Now, all the way back to the beginning, we said lebeisai is to tell you to exclude an arev. Another drasha that you could learn from beisai, letavi el beisai lavet avoitai, lebeisai yat nichnas. You can't go into his house. Aval nichnas l'schar for the house of the beisai of a borrower. Aval nichnas l'schar kesef. You can go into the house of someone who's being paid for. If someone is supposed to get paid for carrying, he's a schlepper. L'schar chamer, if he's a wagon driver, a donkey driver, l'schar pundik, if someone is a hotel owner and he wants to get paid for the services he provided, l'schar diyuknois, if he's a painter, he's someone who paint houses. All these people, if they're owed money for their work, they can take a mashkin and they can go even into the house. Gemara says, but I might think, what happened if one of these types of workers that we say is not treated legabi ischar like a borrower? Oh, I'm sorry, like a lender who's restricted from going into the borrower's house. They can even go into the borrower's house. What happened if the guy worked and he said, I understand, I'm going to extend credit to you. I understand you're not ready to pay me right now. You can pay me in 30 days. At that point, it switches from being someone getting paid for his work, which doesn't have the restriction of going into the borrower's house, and it becomes a regular loan. So Gemara says maybe even even if he did change it into a loan, he could still go into the house. The lender can still go into the house, or the worker can still go into the house of the boss. Any type of loan, even if it originated from a employer-employee relationship. Zok the Mishnah. Almana, bein shehi aniya, bein shehi ashiris, eime mashkenoisa. An almana, there's a special din, that special carve out in the pasuk. Whether she's rich or poor, you can't take a mashkin from her. Shenama lesachval beged almana. You cannot take a beged of an almana. Zok the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan. Almana bein shehi aniya bein shehi asira eime mashkenoisa. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says whether she's rich or poor, you can't take a mashkin, like our Mishnah said. Reb Shimon Omer, Ashira mashkenoisa, aniya eime mashkenoisa. Reb Shimon is mechalik. He says it depends. If she's rich, then you can't take a mashkin. If she's aniya, then she can. So there's an exception for a wealthy almana, a merry widow. She'ata chayiv lahachsala. The reason why you can't take a mashkin, because you have to return it to her. That means if she's an aniyah, so she needs that blanket every day, you're gonna have to go back to her house and return to her blanket. Then when you're gonna come back and you're gonna be coming and going every day to return the blanket and take it back, it's gonna be Metzia Shemra. Very interesting. So the Gemara is going to say this is time of the crop. It's very interesting that we jump to, like you and I would have thought, the reason why you can't take from an almana is because of chesed. It's because of rachmanis and almana. But the emes is, why should an almana who's an ani be different than any person who's an ani? If a person's an ani doesn't have, why is a so the point is it's really the time of the cross is different than what we would have thought. Zok the Gemara, remember the Yehuda loydarish time of the cross, or Shimon darish time of the cross.
Point of Shimon, why does why by a shir mashkin?
Because usher has a bunch of blankets, so he doesn't have to go. He doesn't have to return the blanket to her in the first place. He can go. He can keep it, so it's not going to be the constant going in and out. So the Gemara says it comes out from this. Rabbi Yehuda, who says it doesn't make a difference, he's not darish time of the cross. Shimon is darish time of the cross. But we see that they hold exactly the opposite. The Tanya. This is the pasuk that says L'gabi Melech. A king should not take a lot of wives, and because they'll turn away his heart. His wives will cause him to turn away from Hashem. So Yehuda Aimer Marbahu, Yehuda says he can be Marba, as long as they're fine women. He can take a bunch of wives as long as they're all good shidduchim. But if by the time to get to the fifth shidduch, he's already taken a girl. Didn't go to BJJ. He has to take a girl from a shvacha seminary, and she's going to make him fry probably. Shimon Aimer. Shimon says the other way around. So Rav Yehuda's derish time of the crop. Shimon says even if there's one who's meser labor, he can't marry someone who's going to cause him to go off the derech. What does it mean? He should be ma'aben noshim. The Shimon says even the most fine woman he shouldn't be ma'aben noshim. It's a gzeres hakos. So right? We're saying exactly the opposite. Reb Shimon is saying we're not derish time of the crop, and the Torah says liyarbel psukim and liyarbel noshim, so therefore he can't take extra. So Yehuda loy derish time of the crop. It's like really Rabbi Yehuda says like we said over here. Rabbi Yehuda is not derish time of the crop. But shani hacha the mafarish crop. Because the Torah says the reason. He just says generally we wouldn't say we're going to be derish time of the crop, but over here the Torah said exactly what the reason is. He's saying the reason it must be for a point. My time Rishum Shimon Michti Ba'alma Darshin in time of the crop. So Elamai Yehuda B'derech Klal is not derish time of the crop, and it's only over here. Shimon Be'etzem is derish time of the crop. According to Shimon, Yehuda has a good point. This is not a standard being derish time of the crop. Over here, so we're saying that Einachanami, what we said in our Gemara by an almana is taka the right. That's where the machlokes is. But then why does the pasuk say that they shall yasa levavai by a melech taking extra wives? So let him just say, let the Torah just say you can't take extra wives and don't say the reason. My time only. It's coming to tell you not just but saying that a person is exhorted to be careful that he shouldn't even take one wife. He shouldn't take any wife that will cause him to go off the derech. So that's the mission. A person who takes a rechaim, is like a food processor. What they used to use to grind their grain in the house, not a commercial processor, and it had two parts, and you'd grind the grain between the top part and the bottom part, so the two parts. So someone who takes this, he's chayiv on a loisase, v'chayiv mishum shnei kelim, and he's chayiv for the two kelim, meaning the two parts of taking the two parts. Shenema layachol rechayim v'rechav. The pasuk says the two parts. Rechayim. This Gemara is a little confusing because rechayim means an entire mill, but in this context it means a rechayim, which is the lower part, and the rechav, which is the higher part. So the Torah specifies you shouldn't take both of them. And not only these things, even though the Torah gives an example of the two parts of a mill, but even anything that a person used for Eichel Nefesh, you're not allowed to take, and if you do take it as a mashkin, you're going to be over on a lav. Amr of Huna, Chavel Rechayim Loikeach Shtayim Mishum Rechayim Mishum Kinefesh Uchayvel. Someone who takes a Rechayim, meaning a Rechayim, meaning just the upper part, he's chayiv two things. He's chayiv for the Rechayim, I'm saying that's the lower part, or Mishum Kinefesh Uchayvel. The Torah also says a separate lav for taking something that includes that's used for Eichel Nefesh. Rechayim v'rechev, if he takes both the lower part and the upper part, like a shalish, mishum rechayim v'rechev, for each one of the two parts, mishum kinefesh uchayvel, and because of the general isser on taking something that a person used for Eichel Nefesh. Yehuda Amar chavel rechayim like achas. He says you only are chayiv one if you take the rechayim v'rechev like achas. Rechayim v'rechev like a shtayim. If he takes both, you chayiv two. He says if you take the mill, which is specifically said in the pasuk, you won't also be chayiv for the general isser on using anything that's used for Eichel Nefesh, because that's used for other things. So tomorrow, let's say this is the same as a machlekes Rav Huna Rabbi. This machlekes Rav Huna Rabbi Yehuda is the same as a machlekes Abaye and Rava. What's the machlekes Abaye and Rava? The Amar Rava. Achal no. If someone ate the carbon pesach no means partially cooked, not partially raw, partially cooked. Like a stein, it's going to be very hard for those of us who like a rare steak. When it comes time of the Beis Hamikdash, we're going to have to be very careful that it shouldn't be what our wives are claiming is raw. So, so someone who eats something no like a stein, he gets two lav. Mishum no, because of no, mishum kiyam tzliesh. The Torah also says you have to eat it roasted. Mevushal, if he eats it cooked, like a shtayim, mishum mevushal, mishum kiyam tzliesh. That's Rav Shita. You chayev for both the specific halacha of either eating it no, or eating it or not, or eating it mevushal, which the Torah said you're not allowed to do, and you also chayev kiyam tzliesh. No umavushal, if it's both partially cooked, it's not fully roasted, and it's mavushal, instead of being over a fire, it was cooked in water, it was boiled, like a shalish, is the guy 3. Mishum no, mishum mavushal, mishum loisech lanu, kiyam tzliesh. So Rava seems to be tracking the first shita of Rav Huna, who said that you could be chayiv 2 or 3, you can be chayiv 3 if you do rechev and rechayim. You're going to be chayiv for the specific plus the general. So over here, Rav is saying the same thing. By tzliesh, you're going to be chayiv for the specific of being no or mavushal, and in addition, for the fact that he's over on kiyam tzliesh. Abaye Amar ain't liking alav shebeklalos. Rav says no, you're not going to be chayiv for that you can't eat it like chlenu kiyam tzliesh, because that's a lav shebeklalos. Very similar to Rabbi Yehuda said that the separate lav, the klalistic lav, you're not going to be chayiv for by rechev rechayim. So Abaye is saying over here that by a carbon pesach, you're not going to be chayiv for the general rule of kiyam tzliesh. Lema Abaye damak Rabbi Yehuda, Rava damak Rav Huna. Amalach Rava, anad damak afili Rabbi Yehuda. No, Rava will say that which I'm saying over here by a carbon pesach, that doesn't contradict that I'm saying that you could be chayiv in all 3. That could even be like Rabbi Yehuda, who says over here by rechev and rechayim, you're not going to be chayiv on the extra chayiv of that you're not allowed to use something that's going to be used for eichel nefesh. Hata come Rabbi Yehuda hasam elu dechi nefesh hu chayvel le'mashim rechayim v'rechev. When the pasuk says he nefesh hu chayvel, because he's taking away his nefesh, meaning he's taking something that's needed for eichel nefesh. That's not masher rechayim v'rechav. Hilkach the shvar dvarm hu das. it's not needed for you wouldn't, it's really the other way around from what it sounds. You wouldn't have known from the fact that the Torah said specifically, you can't take a rechev or a chayim. The pasuk says, but I would say that doesn't mean necessarily that everything that's eichel nefesh is included. So therefore, the Torah has to tell you also anything that's eichel nefesh you can take. So it's telling you a different thing. Aval hacha kiyim tzli eish l'mayasa. What if once you said already that you can't eat it no or mavushal? So the Gemara is assuming, even though Taisus asks about it, that covers every possibility. Once you say you can't eat it raw and you can't eat it cooked, so the only option is you have to eat it roasted. So therefore, there's no need to say that second pasuk. So over there, he says that second pasuk is coming to tell you an additional isser. But Einachanami, over here, Gabi Rechav Rechaim, where Rechav Rechaim, you still need to say that Eichel Nefesh is also. That's coming to tell you a separate isser. Shma Mina Lulav. So by Korban Pesach, it says it unnecessarily. It's telling you a second lav. But over here, where it is necessary, it's not going to be added on to the original lav. I would say I even hold like Rav Huna. Ad kalikam Rav Huna hasam el dechi nefesh hu chayvel. The Torah says Yiserahi, who keeping the Yiserahu shaja rechaim v'recha. I would say the other way around. Ki nefesh shu chayvel is extra, and since it's extra, it could say that anything that's a eichel nefesh, and therefore you can't learn out anything from it. Keeping Yiserahi shaja rechaim v'recha. So therefore you can also add it to. We need it for something else. What is it coming to tell you? It's coming to tell you a separate thing, that the only time that you're chayiv for eating a korban pesach, when it's not tzli, is only during the time that you would when you're mechuyev to eat it, when you're supposed to eat it. Meaning, of course, if you wait till after the Zman Achila, you're going to be chayiv for noiser. But if you do so, if you do chayiv and noiser, at that point, the isser of eating it, only tzli eish, has gone away. So it's coming to tell you this additional din. So, b'shasha yesher b'kum echel tzli, yesher b'al toichel na. B'shasha eni b'kum echel tzli, eni b'al toichel na. Tanya kavos Rabbi Yehuda. I'll bring you a raya, like Rabbi Yehuda, Gabi, our original din, that the chiyuv of rechav and rechaim is limited only to is only chayiv for the actual rechav and rechaim. You're not chayiv for the general chiyuv that you can't use anything that has eichel nefesh. Chavel zug shel svarim, b'tzemet shel paris. If someone took as a mashkin a pair of scissors, so I don't know exactly what the old time scissors look like, but they could be disassembled into two separate knives, sort of some two knives that you would put together. But seven shel paris, and this is a yoke of oxen. Somehow they used to use two rings that they would attach together, that would be to make them into a single yoke. Chayiv stein, yechayiv two, zeh ba'atzmei v'zeh ba'atzmei. Each part of each pair, if you did whether it was scissors, these are two examples. Whether you did scissors or a yoke, you chayiv two for each one, since each one is made up of two pieces. I'm sorry. Chayiv shayim. Zeh ba'atzmei and a chayiv alachas. But if you did only one at a time, you only chayiv one. The tanya idach. Chavel zug shel sarv v'tzemet shel paris. Yachol yechayiv alachas. Maybe you only be chayiv one time. Aloy mo yechol rechayiv v'rechav. Ma rechayiv v'rechav sheim mo yichadim. Shnei kelim. Boisam alachas. Even though the rechayiv and rechav are two separate pieces, but when you put them together, they do one thing. V'chayiv al zeb v'nei atzmi al zeb v'nei atzmi. Chayiv on each one alone. Av kol shem shnei kelim yichadim boisam alachas. Chayiv al zeb v'nei atzmi al zeb v'nei atzmi. But in any case, the point is you only chayiv shnayim. We're not saying you also chayiv for the general isser of what you call paloichel nefesh. Of what do we say it? Ki nefesh hu chayvel. Hahu gavra the chavel sakina ashkvasasa mechabre. He took a Schlacht, what do you call it? A sakin, a knife that's used for shchita from his friend. Also, kamei da abaya. Amalei zilla hadre. You have to return it to Havalei Klisha Oisim by Eichel Nefesh. It's used for Eichel Nefesh. You're not allowed to take it. V'sok kum bedina, and then go, and you have to go get the money from him without using this mashkin as your leverage. Rava Amalei Tzarch L'Meikim Bedina Allah. Rava says he doesn't have to go bring a different raya. When someone has a mashkin, he has the power to take it away just based on the mashkin. Yachal litin. Well, how does he get it away without going to din? He can make a taina ad kadei demain. He could take from the borrower kafi the value of that rechaim that you forced him to give back because of this din of oichel nefesh. So the Gemara doesn't explain what the reason is, but the reason is, as the Gemara is going to say in a minute, because he has a migu. He could have said, "This is I bought this sakin and it's mine, and therefore you have to. If you want me to give it back, you got to pay me what you owe me." Why does Abaya not hold of this migu? Why doesn't he have this leverage that the person who's holding the shlacht, the slaughtering knife, that he has? How is it different from these goats that he chushla, they ate some kind of grain in Ardav? And the person whose garden got destroyed by the goats came v'tafaslahu. He grabbed the goats v'katan tuva, and he said, "You owe me a lot of chushla that your goats ate. I've got your goats. If you want your goats back, give me my money." Avudah Shmuel says you can take up to the value of the goats, because again he has the taina. He could have kept the goats and said they're mine. I bought them. So from the fact that he's giving them up, he's saying I took it to be typhus it. So if he has leverage and he can get the money. So what's the difference? How come over there Avudah Shmuel said you could do it? How come Abaya is saying you can't say it here with the knife? So what do you call it? A goat is not something that people normally will lend and rent. It's something that people have. It's their personal property. They use it to produce milk or to, I don't know, to take its hair. But it's not something it's a commercial thing. So you don't just lend it out and rent it. So since it's something that's not normally rented out or lent, so he has a good time to say that he bought it. But over here, Abaya would say, this knife, people will lend it out. So if you would have said that you bought it, if the lender will say he bought it, we won't believe him, because we'll say we wouldn't believe you to say such a thing, because we would say you probably borrowed it. If someone tines on something which is typical to lend or rent out, and he says that it's purchased, he's not believed. What about Rava? Why doesn't Rava agree to this? That the knife, he shouldn't be able to have a taina that he bought it, because we see that there is such a thing, that's something that's normally borrowed. It can't say that it's purchased. So what miga does this person have? He wouldn't have believed if he would have followed through on his threat to claim that it was lakuach, since it's something that's often borrowed or lent. But Rava apik zuga de sarbel of safra dagada miyasmi dvar masin lahash lahasker. We know that Rava actually did. He took away a zuga de sarbela, a type of scissor that's used for cloaks, the safra dagada and fancy svarim, because these are things that people will lend and will rent out. So the person who took them cannot say that these Yisayim that have it cannot say that our father bought it, because it's very likely the father rented it or borrowed it. Amalach Rava, Hainami, even the me Hagma Kapti and Shivalei Mushli, since he says I keep forgetting, what's the word for a sakin that a sheikhet uses? A chalat, right? A chalat. right? A chalat or a chalaf. Anyway, these are very valuable things, and if they get nicked, they lose their value. So people do not generally lend them out. It's not like a regular knife that a person has in his drawer. It's an expensive piece of equipment, and therefore people don't lend it. And therefore, it was a good taina to say, according to him, that I could have said it was purchased. We'll stop over here.